gonna have to chill for a minute. Did I just smell a candy like I could tell the difference in smell? I'm a clown, dude. So what's up, yo? Got oh, this fucking scoreboard is ridiculous.
Try the A&W Spicy Dill Pickle Buddy Burger for just $3.99.
Babe, this crochet obsession has got to stop.
Babe. Put the wooble down. You can make your own with the Woobles kit.
You telling me that I can make my own?
Yep. The Woobles is a learn to crochet kit made for complete beginners.
Yep.
I learned to crochet for the dino in a day.
Happy little games. Hey everybody, just a quick reminder that if you enjoy this content or any of my videos, be sure and leave a like. It helps support the channel and allows my videos to move it on up with YouTube's algorithm. Thanks again. Let me just say, growing up during the golden age of arcades was a fantastic time. Arcade games were literally everywhere, from gas stations to laundromats to carnivals. Looking back on that era brings a tear to my eye and a great big dose of nostalgia that runs from my head to my virtual toes. It was basically the wild, wild west when it came to video game design, and usually there were no limits. Designers were taking chances and the creativity was off the charts. All you had to do was walk into an arcade back in the day and you would see not only visually pleasing games but also some pretty unique controls. For example, you had the beer swilling game Tapper, which used an actual beer tap to dispense drinks, and the various driving games that used a wheel and foot pedal such as APB. If there was ever an arcade title that encapsulated the 1980s, then look no further than the game Paperboy. This fantastic isometric paper delivery game had incredibly detailed pixel art, iconic audio, and an actual handlebar that you used to serve as many houses as you could. The game proved to be a classic, which is why we are still talking about it almost 40 years later. What arcade game inspired the design of this game? Why did the game take 2 years to complete? So grab your BMX and get ready to pedal faster than you ever have before, because this is the history of Paperboy. The year is 1982, and Atari game designers John Salwitz and Dave Ralston are hard at work at Atari's weekly beer party. After coming into work the next day, they discovered a tapper that was not quite tapped out. After dispensing a few tasty beverages, they did some brainstorming. It was at this moment that everything clicked. Ralston had produced a number of storyboards that showed a projection of an entire street. That very same day, They ended up literally populating around 60 to 70% of where all the characters and objects in the game would end up. The original design and perspective came from the isometric game Zaxxon, which Ralston recalls had a fresh and unique perspective. This helped it stand out from all the other arcade games at the time. The idea for using the paper delivery motif came from Ralston's real-life portrayal as a real-life paperboy. He had grown up as the baby of a family of 5, where each of the 5 boys all were paperboys. According to Mr. Ralston, the one thing I can remember about those days is driving around as a family and seeing newspapers on roofs and bushes and stuff. Not everyone was a good paperboy in real life, and I think that was at the heart of the idea. I just thought it would be an interesting twist for a game. While they had a great idea and a cool, fresh take, it couldn't be conceived until a couple of years later. The extra time proved beneficial to the actual game itself, since during that time a number of extra enhancements came along, including the introduction of the System 2 board. This particular board also played host to a number of other classic Atari games such as Super Sprint, 720 Degrees, and APV. Despite the graphics and animation being created with very primitive tools, everything came together and looks great. Each little object seems to have their own unique personality, and one of the cool aspects of the game, especially back in the day, was seeing how far into it you could get and what new objects you could discover. Despite it looking like a mishmash of things thrown together, the developers were very deliberate when and where they put these objects. You had everything from a hearse, oncoming traffic, dogs, burglars, breakdancers, bow boxes, drunks, the Grim Reaper, and more. Originally, though, things were a bit more bizarre. The first few iterations of the game saw a number of things such as runaway pianos, giant snails, and even speedboats going down the road. With these bizarre characters, there was one in particular that the test market absolutely loved. The testers were a bit lukewarm to the random woman pushing a shopping cart. According to Mr. Ralston, one thing we observed from sitting in a test arcade for hours on end watching players was that everyone was lining up to go for Granny. That was the one character that everyone wanted to nail. Once you started dropping in more real characters, bullies, winos, burglars, etc., the game really took off. Thanks to the multitude of interactive objects, it was always a blast seeing what you could tip over or break with your weapon of mass destruction. Thanks to the 2-year development time, the game was focus tested numerous times before it was eventually revealed to the public. Originally, the game used a standard 8-way joystick controller, but the general public did not like it at all. It was at this point they decided to try something a little more unique, and that came in the form of actual handlebars. Mr. Ralston thinks it was the unique perspective that confused players when using the joystick. Atari games were known for its non-standard control systems, such as the trackball for Marble Madness, the yoke controller for Star Wars, and of course, the steering wheels for all the various driving games. The handlebars were basically a Star Wars yoke controller that was modified for Paperboy and was designed by Milt Loper, who worked for Atari's mechanical shop. The handlebars themselves had to be strong and resistant in order to put up with the constant pounding that any snotty 12-year-old kid would give it. After a few iterations of the controller, it was good to go. One person who was often forgotten in the success of this game was Atari's marketing rep, Don Traeger. He understood the game and helped the team realize their vision and also turn it into the fun games that we know and love today. Something else that people fondly remember in this game are the number of voice samples provided by our Paperboy. In total, there are over 2 minutes of voice clips from our freckle-faced hero.
Oh, wow, that's what I get. That's no good. Oh, where am I?
In actuality, the voice belongs to marketing rep Don Traeger. As development progressed on the game, the team realized they had a hit on their hands because during lunch, other Atari employees would drift over and play the game, oftentimes interrupting their work just so they could have one more play. One thing the devs wanted to include was the ability to play as a paper girl. Unfortunately, at this point they were out of memory, so they were stuck with only one playable character, including getting Paperboy's throwing animation just right. Other things that couldn't be included were proper physics in motion that would see newspapers bounce off walls. Despite numerous months of playtesting, a bug was discovered that allowed massive points to be obtained. If you move on the right side of the screen at just the right point, you can totally bypass the obstacle course, allowing you to rack up points a mundo. The original mock-up for the arcade cabinet looked quite a bit different than what we eventually received. One of these even survived, as you can see in this photo. The actual cabinet itself looks to be a bit generic, as the prototype has nice graphics and color of our freckle-faced hero. Also, thanks to the 2-year development process, was the innovation in its display technology. At the time, typical raster-based arcade games used a resolution of 320 by 240 pixels. Hardware engineer Doug Snyder created a new medium resolution monitor that could display pixels at a resolution of 512 by 384. Nothing groundbreaking by today's standards, but at the time, is what helped Atari's graphics look so much better than everything else. Another cool feature is that the player does have a choice. You are allowed to either be a good paperboy who makes all of his deliveries and doesn't smash anything, or a rogue paperboy that knocks over tombstones and breaks windows. This was also one of the first games that had an actual ending, which did not go over too well with the higher-ups at Atari. By Atari in 1984. As the story goes, you are a young paperboy living in the blissful town of Suburbia. The object of the game is to deliver copies of the newspaper, the Daily Sun, to the various customers on the street using your bicycle. The game starts off with you having the option of choosing from 3 different streets, all ranging in various levels of difficulty. They are Easy Street, which is where I met my wife, Middle Road, which is the medium difficulty, and Hard Way, which is the most difficult. As I mentioned, the goal of the game is to deliver as many papers as you can to all your various customers. You control your paperboy with the provided handlebars, steering left and right and adjusting the speed by pushing forward and back. You have a fire button to launch them, which requires you to hit either the doormat or throw it directly into the mailbox for a nice little bonus. Littered throughout the streets are black non-customer houses which do not require any deliveries. With these houses comes something else that was truly a stroke of genius, and that is you can do an excessive amount of damage to these properties. Whether it's breaking glass or knocking over tombstones, the more damage you do, the more points you receive. You have to be careful though, because if you accidentally damage one of your customers' properties, then they will cancel their subscription. Subscriptions can also be canceled if you fail to deliver a paper. Keep in mind though, you can only hold 10 newspapers at a time, but there are stacks of extra newspapers lying around which will replenish your stash. As if properly delivering these newspapers weren't hard enough, there are a number of obstacles that you have to avoid. Anything and everything you would expect from strolling down a busy suburban street will be in your way, including some rather peculiar oddities. You have everything from radio-controlled cars, men on unicycles, burglars, shopping carts, Volkswagen bugs, a hearse, the Grim Reaper, men fighting, breakdancers, and more. Something else to keep in mind is that if you ride too slow, a swarm of bees will chase you, forcing you to ride faster. Each day is split into 2 sections, and at the end of the second part, you will head straight into the obstacle course. You have to hit a number of targets with your papers, jump ramps, avoid holes, and cross the finish line before time runs out. If you crash your bike or time runs out, you do not receive any bonus points. However, if you do cross the finish line, you'll receive a bonus and proceed to the next day. Keep in mind that if you are at the bottom of the rung in terms of delivering papers and all of your customers are canceled, then the game is over. If you successfully manage to deliver a paper to each one of your customers, you are awarded a bonus. If all of the papers are delivered perfectly to each house, the player receives double points for each subscriber. For each street, there are 7 stages, 1 for each day of the week. On Sunday, the last day, the newspapers appear to be heavier and do not travel as fast when thrown. If you successfully deliver all the papers on all 7 days, a special feature pops up with a headline that reads, "Paperboy wins award for outstanding paper delivery," at which point the game is over.
Quick check from Capital One is very efficient. Capital One trusting me felt like a huge sigh of relief. It definitely meant a lot to me. It provides a lot of peace of mind as well.
Every day I feel like I have nothing to wear. I love to add new pieces to my wardrobe, yet I also want to be sustainable. Thanks to the Carrot app, it's easier than ever before. I literally search clothing in the app and have a wide variety of options ranging in price. Each seller has real ratings and reviews, so you feel safe contacting the seller and receiving your items. The app has so much more than just clothing, including bags, electronics, and furniture. This jacket was my greatest find yet. There are literally so many deals on the app. I'm so excited for my next one. You have to check it out. Download the Carrot app today.
That's rad.
The pixel art is fantastic. The game just oozes with personality. The gameplay is fast and incredibly intense, especially the later into the game you get. Objects will pop up without much of a warning, either crashing into your paperboy or forcing you to crash into something else. With that being said, the game is still a lot of fun to play and very addicting. The music and sound effects are great, and I was amazed to learn that there were over 2 minutes of voice clips in the game. I knew there were quite a few, but I didn't realize how many until I actually sat down and listened to them. I'm going to include these since many of you may not have heard these, especially without the music in the background. There are even a couple of cool Ghostbusters and Punch-Out references. Feel free to fast forward if you like.
You realize, of course, this means war. Okay, now I'm mad. I didn't slime. Uh-oh. Oh, wow, that's what I get. That's no good. Oh, where am I? Boy, what a headache. Just one of those days. Sometimes I hate this job. What a jerk I am. Oh no. That's no fair. That's not my fault. Oh man, that's bogus. I live a life of danger. No! Oh wow. Awesome toss. What a great toss. Now you have a friend in the paper business. That's rad. Am I great or what? That's casual. Got it. Right in the mailbox. Delivery with a smile. All right. Hey, blasters. Sorry about that. One less customer. Send me the bill. Does this mean no tip? Don't tell my boss. Sorry, it slipped. I didn't mean it. Not again. Oh, it's you again. There I go again. I knew that would happen. What a surprise. I can't believe I did that. Whoa, I think I gotta change my shorts. Hey, bees, get off my face. Does this mean you don't love me anymore? I think she's mad. Try that again and I'll fight you. Nice doggy. Bad dog. That's kind of big, isn't it? Hey, I know that, dude. Let's see you hang 10. I hate that kid. Got any cookies in there? Man, that guy's wasted. Hey, nice mohawk. Here, you dizzy yet? Body blow, uppercut, uppercut. Looking for a passenger? Don't you have some milk to deliver? Crazy drivers. Back off. Wow.
You're fired.
The game proved to be a huge success for the company, selling 3,500 cabinets at a cost of just over $2,500. The home conversions were also extremely profitable, with just the NES version by itself selling 2 million copies.
When you get a round-trip companion voucher every year, everyone you know will want to be your companion.
Warning. Such behavior is irresponsible, immature, and very foolish. We recommend you try it at home. Paperboy from Mindscape for your Nintendo Entertainment System.
With the phenomenal success of the original Paperboy on all platforms, it was almost a 100% bona fide guarantee that there would be a sequel. Paperboy 2 skips arcades completely and was released on a number of home computer platforms and consoles. The original developers were not involved with this game, as this one was brought to us by Tengen and released by Mindscape. This time around, you can play as either a Paperboy or a Paper Girl, although both characters play the same. The gameplay has been expanded to allow you to deliver newspapers to both sides of the street. However, this does make the gameplay a bit more difficult. The 16-bit version also allows your character to jump, which does come in handy. A neat little addition is the two-player mode, in which both players take turns on each day and then compete against each other at the same time on the obstacle course. There are brand new obstacles, and although they have increased in variety, most of the charm that was found in the original arcade game is missing. The graphics are merely adequate, with the 16-bit versions turning out the best. The title character apparently has had his tongue ripped out because he no longer speaks. The game is extremely difficult, as the AI is just brutally unfair. You have very little time to react when things pop up on the screen. However, as far as sequels go, if the original Paperboy was Breakin', then this game is Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo. new and improved version was released for the Nintendo 64 in 1999. This takes the tried and true 2D pixel art and transforms it into an ugly 3D monstrosity. The developers tried to keep the gameplay as true to the arcade original as possible, but it just doesn't work in the 3D format. The goal is still to deliver papers while avoiding all the various obstacles, but it's let down by the horrendous twitchy controls. Not only do we have some ugly graphics, we also have some rather uninspiring music as well. They try to jazz up the gameplay just a bit by adding bonus levels and obstacle courses, but it's like putting lipstick on a pig. This game received merely average reviews by the critics when it was released, and rightly so. An even uglier and skankier version was due to be released for the original PlayStation, but it was canceled at the last minute. The original arcade game was released in the compilation Midway Arcade Treasures, which was released for the GameCube, PlayStation 2, Xbox, and Windows in 2003. It was also released as part of Midway Arcade Treasures Extended Play for the PSP. In 2005, a 2-pack was released for the Game Boy Advance, which featured Paperboy and Rampage. While Rampage turned out okay, Paperboy did not. The graphics do not look too shabby, but the controls are what lets it down. Your Paperboy kind of scats all over the place, making those precision throws much more difficult than they should be. The music is pretty good, and some of the Paperboy's voice samples are present, although sometimes he will say the wrong thing even though he successfully makes a delivery. Very odd indeed. The controls in this version are absolutely horrible, with your character constantly being pulled to the right. Also, the collision detection is way off, and a lot of times you'll pass right through objects, and other times it will say you hit something when you clearly didn't. When the game was released, it was a budget title for only $20. I guess it's the old adage of you get what you pay for.
Here's to 60 years of love and hockey. Together.
I'll axe the NDP Trudeau tax to bring home lower prices.
The arcade game was released on Xbox Live Arcade in 2007. Paperboy Wheels on Fire was released for mobile phones in early 2009. This game was incredibly difficult to play due to having to use the number pad to control your character. It did offer a couple of different options, including a challenge mode and a career mode, both of them expanding upon the original concept. Paperboy Special Delivery was released for iOS in 2010. This is an excellent title which updates the graphics and also the controls. There is an option to use the tilt sensor to control your Paperboy, which works surprisingly well. There is now a story mode in which your character has to complete a 20-level game in order to save money to buy a brand new game console. A lot of the original obstacles make their return, but there are some new ones as well. You'll also acquire different skills and abilities the further into the game you progress, such as throwing multiple papers at once. This was a fantastic update that unfortunately is no longer available. The original arcade title could also be played in the video game LEGO Dimensions. It was also included with a number of other titles in Arcade 1-Up's Midway Legacies Edition arcade machine. While this game is the actual arcade game running under emulation, it is missing the handlebars. While the overall arcade cabinet looks great, the controls are terrible without the handlebars. Paperboy made his debut on the big screen in 2012's Wreck-It Ralph in a Blink and You Miss It cameo. He was also one of the antagonists in the movie Pixels, which was released in 2015. And of course, you know you have a successful IP on your hands when Tiger Electronics comes a-calling. A number of unofficial remakes have been done over the years, including a pretty cool VR version entitled Special Delivery. Now let's check out some of the home conversions. These were released in 1986 by Elite Software. They were in charge of the home computer conversions, and they ranged wildly from pretty good to pretty rank. Let's start by taking a look at the BBC version. Despite the action taking place in a small window, the speed of the game is extremely slow. I've said it before and I'll say it again, it's slower than a turtle fart. Rather than pedaling a fast BMX, it feels like you are pedaling a tricycle. There is no music and very little action on screen in terms of obstacles. Due to the slow speed, the gameplay is extremely stiff. There is also some weird twitching going on with the main Paperboy sprite. Sticking with British-based computers, the Spectrum version is up next. This version is similar to the BBC version, although the color has been upgraded ever so slightly, and our hero has apparently used the same vitamins as Lance Armstrong because the speed is extremely fast. The scrolling is fairly smooth and the playability is really good. Despite only having mostly monochrome colors, everything is nicely detailed and does not get lost in the background. What is not quite so nice, though, is the sound. There is no music, but there are plenty of Quixomundo with short, sweet blasts at every turn. The good old Commodore 64 version is up next and is nearly average at best. The game features some rather unattractive expanded sprites which did not look so great back in 1986. The color palette was also a bit of a faux pas in my opinion, with plenty of grays and browns to go around. Certain levels even featured black sidewalks which certainly didn't turn out too well. The scrolling, though, is smooth, and the gameplay is pretty good. The iconic Paperboy theme has been exchanged for some new tunes, which sounds pretty good, but I would have preferred the original. If you ever wondered why there wasn't a lot of variety in the obstacles, then you wouldn't be the only one. There were a number of sprites that were created but were never used, such as the breakdancers, cars, tornadoes, and yes, even Granny and her shopping cart.
This is our call to inaction, to answer the call of the recliner.
We're getting takeout because we've been out all day long.
It's the Boxing Week sale. Great deals on your new favorite lazy spots, plus special financing available.
We will take a load off by loading up on snacks.
Hurry in, Boxing Week sale going on now. Lazy Boy, long live the lazy.
We support all generations. 15% of our employees are over 50 years old.
If you ever wanted an uglier, slower, and choppier version of the Commodore 64 port, then you will be pleased as punch to play the Apple II version. This thing is an abomination with its purple sidewalk and choppy gameplay. There is also absolutely no sound. Due to the slow scrolling, the gameplay is extremely challenging. If the name of your game is pain, then this is the game for you. Sticking with the Apple line, let's take a look at the Apple II GS version. This is a slightly more colorful version of the Commodore 64, which, considering how much more powerful the system is, it's quite the letdown. The game features the same expanded, unattractive sprites, and the sound is absolutely abysmal. While the Commodore 64 is definitely a bit on the duller side when it comes to the palette, the music and controls more than make up for it. The Commodore 16 plus 4 version turned out absolutely terrible. For starters, your Paperboy looks like he's riding a long neck Harley instead of a bicycle. The papers themselves also resemble burritos, so possibly he's taking a job with Uber Eats instead. To be fair, it is fast and it does control fairly well. Switching over to the PC side, here is the Amiga conversion. This turned out to be a rather slick conversion with graphics that are much more in line with the arcade original. The sprites are nicely detailed and they feature plenty of color. The animation is smooth along with the scrolling of the screen, which is something other versions had difficulty pulling off. The music is fantastic, and while our Paperboy doesn't have much to say, there are plenty of other digitized sound effects straight from the coin-op, such as the glass breaking and a crazy dog who chases you. It controls pretty well, even if the handlebars are sorely missing. The Atari ST version is up next, and it feels like a stripped-down Amiga conversion, even though it was probably the other way around. The action takes place in a smaller window, which was done to help speed up the gameplay, which obviously doesn't work. The scrolling is extremely choppy, but at least it still plays pretty good. The music is also not as good, and there are no digitized samples from the arcade game. Overall, it's not too bad, but it could have been a whole lot better. Let's take a look at the very first home console version, which was released for the NES. If you can get past the blocky, simplistic graphics, this is a very good version of Paperboy. While the colors leave a lot to be desired, the gameplay itself is pretty spot on. The music is good, and it even features some digitized sound effects, which always helps enhance the arcade experience. Sticking with the 8-bits, the Sega Master System is a masterpiece. The sprites are detailed and colorful and are animated quite nicely. The scrolling of the street is very smooth and the gameplay is fast. However, there is no sampled sound as found in the NES version, and the music is a bit iffy. Overall though, for an 8-bit system, this turned out rather well. sexy Atari Lynx also produced another fantastic conversion. The graphics are nicely detailed and the screen scrolls at a fairly smooth pace. The music isn't too bad and there are some nice digitized sound effects littered throughout. The controls are a bit sticky in spots, but overall, programmer Al Baker did a bang-up job. By the way, he also converted Pit Fighter to the Lynx, which was another one that turned out really good.
Cheesy flavors for each one of me. Wanted, needed cheesy.
As far as the 8-bit computer ports, the Amstrad version is the best of the best. The graphics are extremely colorful and detailed, but unfortunately, the camera is zoomed in a bit too close, making things difficult to see. The scrolling is also a bit on the jerky side, but you do tend to get used to it. As far as the audio goes, there is no sound whatsoever. There were actually 2 versions released for the Amstrad, with this one having only been released as part of a compilation in Spain. Supposedly, this was the original version that was going to be released by Elite, but they decided it wasn't good enough for the home market and commissioned a second conversion to be done by a different developer. This version is fast and it does have sound, it's just too bad your eyeballs will bleed from staring at all those nasty colors. The MS-DOS version turned out pretty good, especially for PC conversions back in the mid-80s. It features some colorful EGA graphics and fairly smooth scrolling. The only problem is that it zoomed in just a bit, making things difficult to see. It actually looks like a more refined version of the second Amstrad version. There is no music whatsoever, with only PC speaker bloops and bleeps for the sound effects. It also controls fairly well. The Game Boy conversion is based on the NES port. While the NES version played a pretty good game of Paperboy, this one does not. While it looks okay for Game Boy conversions, the controls are terrible with your Paperboy shooting all over the road. The collision detection is also off at various points. Oftentimes you'll throw papers that will go right through an object. The music is decent with that catchy Paperboy theme we all know and love. The Sega Game Gear version looks to be a port of the Master System, which is not a bad thing. Once again, the graphics have that zoomed in effect, but other than that, it's pretty faithful. The music is butt nasty, but it does control really well. And the last portable version is the Game Boy Color port, which turned out much better than the original Game Boy offering. The sprites are detailed with a fair amount of color and some smooth scrolling. The sound effects and music are good, with your eardrums not being pierced in this version. The same control issues found in the Game Boy version is also present here. Sega Genesis version. Extremely close to the arcade original original with excellent detailed sprites and smooth animation. It also features some nice in-game music plus a lot of the arcade's voice samples, although they are a bit scratchy. There are also some issues with the collision detection, but overall, it's a great version of Paperboy, especially back in the day. Paperboy is one of my all-time favorite arcade games. I can still recall going into a truck stop with my parents in Owatonna, Minnesota, and seeing it for the first time. When I started this channel, it was one of the first games I tried to tackle with my handheld mic and horrible editing skills. The runtime of that original video was only around 10 minutes. I wanted to give Paperboy the treatment it deserved, and hopefully you all enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. If you've never had the chance to head on over to Easy Street, all the while being chased by a rabid dog and grannies with shopping carts, be sure and give this game a shot. You'll be glad you did. If you like this video, be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Also, if you would like to support me on Patreon, please click the link below. If you would like to contribute but not sign up for my Patreon, you can always click the donate button up above. Thanks everyone for watching.
She's not taking baby bites.
Okay, it's nice. It makes clean, delicious flavor.
This is like all mashed potatoes, but it does look good. It's really tasty.
For dinner tonight?
Yeah, we could definitely do this for dinner tonight.
Quest Wealth Portfolios can manage your investments for you with much lower fees. Now that's something worth sharing.
Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there, wondering, doubting, fearing. These are the words of Edgar Allan Poe that appear on screen the moment eternal darkness begins. Before we see a developer, or publisher, or even a main menu, we're invited to ponder on what I consider to be the most horrifying element of the human experience. That old and ancient enemy, darkness. It's a frontier that we've been beating back with fire. Since the light bulb gave us illumination on command, and even its outmost physical borders have been breached, man long since breaking open the night sky and stepping out into the vast infinite of space. And yet, despite that inevitable forward march, darkness remains as terrifying today as it was to those proto-humans desperately lighting the first fires. It's symbolic of everything we fear: isolation, the unknown, a loss of self and sense, and most of all, it's so often astounding, death itself. It's irrational, but it's all too common, and unfortunately it's something that I'm acutely familiar with. In my early 20s, I really struggled with anxiety, probably stemming from the realization that I was growing up, which inevitably meant that one day my life would come to an end. It wasn't so much the act of dying that I feared, just the insignificance of life, its fleeting nature, a brief flicker of consciousness when stood next to the vast infinite of the universe. What was the point of my life? Was I really any different to the tiny insects and barely visible creatures whose lives I viewed with utter indifference? Thankfully, it's a state of mind that I've long since moved on. It's one of the only times in my life I've ever been stricken with dread. Not out of surprise or some kind of evolutionary fight or flight, but when faced with my utter pointlessness and the vast, unknowable, and terrifying scope of human life itself, an abyss that can't be